What would you do if you knew someone was watching every move you made, but you couldn't prove it? That cold, silent gaze that doesn't blink or look away, just waits. I moved into a quiet apartment, thinking I'd found peace. But every morning, without fail, he'd be there, standing across the parking lot, staring through his glass door like a statue. At first, I thought I was imagining things, until the tapping started. And then, I never opened my blinds again. And the truly terrifying question: what if the watcher isn't just watching? What if they're waiting for you to look back? Tonight, we're diving into true creepy neighbor horror stories that actually happened. So stick close and keep watching till the end to find out what happened, before it was too late. But before we start, make sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss any new chilling releases. If you're enjoying the content, hit like, drop a comment, and share this video. Let's see how many of you truly love this kind of episodes. But there's a little twist. One of the stories you're about to hear isn't real. It was completely made up. Watch till the end, try to guess which one, and leave your guess in the comments. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. When I was 23, I finally landed my first full-time job, a tech support role at a call center in Maple Creek, Missouri. Not glamorous by any stretch, but it paid the bills. I moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment in an old complex called Oak Hill Pines. The name made it sound nicer than it really was. The building had seen better days: creaky floors, a heater that wheezed like an old smoker, and kitchen cabinets that never quite shut properly. Still, it was mine. I didn't have a roommate anymore and could finally live by my own schedule without worrying about anyone else. My unit was on the second floor at the far back corner. I liked it there. Fewer neighbors, a bit more privacy. Out the back window, there was a small patch of trees behind the parking lot, and in the early mornings, sunlight would stream through in long, lazy lines. It reminded me of the quiet weekends I spent at my grandparents' house growing up. It felt safe, familiar. The first week or so passed without incident. I got used to cooking for myself, found out which washing machines didn't eat quarters, and slowly made the space feel like home. I was sleeping better than I had in years. Then I noticed him. He lived directly across the lot from me, on the same floor, just opposite my unit with a thin strip of parking separating us. The first time I saw him was one morning before work. I rolled up the blinds and there he was, standing still behind his sliding glass door, staring right at my window. There was no expression on his face, just a blank, unsettling stillness, as if he was frozen in place. I blinked, unsure if I was really seeing it. I gave a quick, awkward wave. Nothing. No blink. No twitch. Just that unchanging stare. It was so unnatural, I shut the blinds halfway and told myself it was nothing. Maybe he wasn't looking at me. Maybe it was just the light playing tricks. But then it happened again. And again. Every morning that week, whenever I opened my blinds, he was there, motionless, watching. By the fourth day, I stopped opening the blinds altogether. I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe he was dealing with something, PTSD, a sleep disorder, or just someone lost in thought. I joked with my friend Alex on the phone that I'd moved next to a practicing mime or a sleepwalker. I laughed, but deep down, I was uneasy. I started keeping the lights low at night, not because I thought he could see anything, but because I didn't want to feel so exposed. Then came the tapping. It was a Friday night, just after 1 a.m. I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom fan humming quietly when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, rhythmic, patient, not frantic. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, and switched the fan off. The sound was coming from the balcony. I crept out of the bathroom, every hair on my arm standing on end. Peeking just an inch past the curtain, I saw him again, standing behind his glass door, less than 20 feet away. One finger slowly tapped the glass. Our eyes met. For the first time, he smiled. Not warm or friendly, not malicious either. Expectant, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, he lifted his hand and waved. I didn't sleep that night. Every light in the apartment was on, and I shoved the heaviest chair I had under the door handle. The next morning, a small package sat on my doormat. No label, no markings, just a plain brown box sealed with a strip of masking tape. Inside was a cheap plastic bracelet, the kind you find in diner vending machines, pink with faded gold letters spelling out "Sweetheart." I stared at it for a moment, then tossed it in the trash. I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe some kid in the complex left it by mistake, or someone had the wrong door. But when a second package arrived 2 days later, my stomach dropped. This one was flat. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me, sitting on my balcony reading a book. I hadn't noticed anyone nearby. I looked relaxed, legs up, head tilted to the side, completely unaware I was being watched. I went to the leasing office immediately. The receptionist looked worried, but said they'd notify maintenance and maybe request better lighting outside. There was no urgency, no real plan. I stopped using my balcony, closed the blinds tight, started parking in different spots, but it didn't stop. A week later, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a scraping sound outside, like something dragging across concrete. Long, steady, slow. I didn't look outside. I just sat there, heart pounding, waiting for it to end. The next morning, a dead crow lay on my doormat. Its wings were spread unnaturally wide, and tied to one leg was another Polaroid, this time of me asleep on the couch. I called the police. They came, took notes, and questioned me. I told them everything about the man across the lot. They went to speak with him. When they returned, one officer shrugged. The guy claimed he worked night shifts and was hardly home. He said he didn't know me and had no criminal history. There was nothing they could act on. I asked if they could search his apartment, but they said no. I packed a bag and stayed with Alex that night. That's when the messages started. Texts from an unknown number with no caller ID. You looked peaceful last night. You left the curtain cracked. I like that. Sometimes the messages came with photos. My backpack by the door, my coffee mug outside, my phone on the kitchen table, all taken from inside my apartment. I spent my own money replacing the locks, installing a security bar on the sliding door. It didn't help. One afternoon, I went back alone to grab a few things. Middle of the day. Bright sunlight. The apartment looked untouched. No signs of forced entry. Everything in place. Except for one thing. A kitchen chair was moved into the hallway, facing the bathroom, perfectly still. On the seat lay the pink bracelet, the same one I'd thrown away. I didn't take anything else. I left the door wide open and drove straight to Alex's. The next day, Alex went to the leasing office to help break my lease. The manager didn't hesitate. She barely said a word, just signed the paperwork and said, "You're not the first." She looked out the window, avoiding eye contact. I never went back. When I was 25, I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in an old 4-story brick building. The elevator was always breaking down, getting stuck between floors, lights flickering on and off. Most people just took the stairs, even when the elevator worked. Since I lived on the second floor, it wasn't a huge hassle, but carrying groceries up the stairs was a pain. One evening, I was juggling 2 heavy grocery bags, one slipping out of my grip as I fumbled to unlock the main door. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Need a hand with that?" I turned and saw a man I'd barely noticed before, maybe in his late 30s, dressed decently, clean shoes. I think he lived on the 3rd floor. I hadn't talked to him before, but didn't want to be rude. "Sure, thanks," I said. He didn't take the bags, just followed quietly behind me as I climbed the stairs. When I opened my apartment door, he stepped in without asking, like it was the most natural thing. I froze, still holding a bag, while he wandered into the kitchen, looking around like he was inspecting the place. "Nice place," he said, opening the fridge door casually. "You live alone?" I hesitated. My roommate's usually home on Wednesdays. He nodded slowly and glanced at the calendar magnet on the fridge. Today's Wednesday. She's coming later, I added quickly. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was measuring something, then smiled and said, "Good." Without another word, he left. I stood there stunned, the bag still on the floor. The whole thing lasted maybe 3 or 4 minutes but left me feeling off. I didn't even lock the door right away. The rest of the week passed quietly. I avoided eye contact with him in the stairwell and didn't tell anyone what happened. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe he was just awkward, or I was being paranoid. Then exactly 1 week later, I ran into him near the elevator. It was working that day, and as I stepped in, he blocked the door with his arm. No greeting, no smile, just handed me a folded piece of paper. "You always leave around 6:20 for the gym, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right?" he said. I unfolded it. It was a handwritten schedule, my schedule. Every gym class I'd attended, even the ones I'd only been to twice, were written down. Times circled, notes next to each one. Returns 8:15, usually alone, late on April 12th, stuff like that. "If you change anything," he added, "I'll update it, but try not to." I forced a laugh, but it felt all wrong. "It's not a joke," he said. Then he stepped into the elevator. I waited until it came back down empty before I used it. That night, I skipped the gym. I locked every lock on the door, including the chain. Around 9:30, there was a knock. 2 short knocks, a pause, then 1 long knock. I didn't move or say anything. The peephole was covered, taped over. "Just checking about that noise earlier," a calm, low voice said from outside. It was him. I stayed silent, phone in hand, ready but too scared to call anyone. Eventually, I heard footsteps walking away. The next morning, taped to my door with green masking tape, was a piece of lined paper with just 7 words in all caps. "Doors for friends don't stay shut." I called the non-emergency police line. An officer came within 20 minutes. He was polite, asked a few questions but didn't seem overly concerned. I showed him the note and the schedule. He raised his eyebrows. "You should think about a restraining order," he said. "That's enough to start. But unless he does something more, it's not guaranteed. Document everything. Take pictures. Don't answer the door." He gave me a card with his name and a case number, then left. 2 days later, the judge signed the restraining order. It felt like a box was drawn around my life. Finally, something I could defend. I signed up for a weekend self-defense course and a basic firearm safety class. I didn't own a gun yet, but I needed to stop feeling like prey. When the papers were served, I watched through the peephole as a plainclothes officer handed him the envelope. The man took it with the same blank expression, like junk mail. 3 days later, I came home to find a plastic toy gun sitting dead center on my welcome mat. It was pink, missing its trigger, and had 1 cracked side. It was no accident, deliberate and aimed right at my door. I called the community officer, who came within the hour and bagged the toy like evidence. No fingerprints, but the message was clear. Patrol cars started swinging by twice a week, but it never felt like enough. The neighbor never disappeared. He stopped speaking directly to me, but I could hear him pacing his floor late at night. Slow and heavy steps, then fast and uneven, like he was chasing something only he could see. Sometimes, I caught fragments of whispered phrases. "Wrong time, not Wednesday, should have knocked." I started turning on the bathroom fan and putting a floor fan in the hallway outside my bedroom to drown out the footsteps. Silence was worse. It meant I might hear him again. One Saturday night, I came home late to flashing police lights in the courtyard. 2 cruisers were parked on the grass, blocking the curb. I stayed in my car, watching as cops pulled the neighbor away from a teenager who was trying to fight back. The neighbor was bleeding from his forehead, yelling something no one heard. The building manager later posted a vague notice about police reports and school drug activity, but I knew the neighbor had claimed he was protecting the building. He even said he needed stitches and was held overnight for observation. I thought it might be over, but he was back a month later. His footsteps creaked on the floor above mine, irregular and heavy, always near the window facing the alley. I stopped using the stairs, waited for the elevator even if it took 5 minutes. and kept a non-lethal pistol in my purse, thumb resting on the safety switch whenever I came home. 6 months ago, I moved out. I found a studio in a guarded downtown building. Passcode entry, a live guard, cameras everywhere. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I didn't ask for my old deposit back. I cut ties with the landlord and left no forwarding address. I learned something I should have known. Being polite doesn't mean giving people access. Being kind doesn't mean being unprotected. People who walk into your home without permission usually don't stop. You either shut the door or they keep walking. Boundaries aren't about tone or words. They're actions. Now, when friends ask why I'm so firm about space, why I refuse unexpected visits or ignore knocks, I tell them it's not personal. I just know how silence can turn, fast and deadly. Sometimes a closed door is the only statement that matters. A few years ago, I came home from work to find my girlfriend sitting on the couch with this distant, hollow look in her eyes. When I asked what was wrong, she hit me with the classic, "We need to talk." She explained that she wasn't happy anymore, that maybe it was best for us to take a break, see other people, figure out if we were truly meant to be. I hated the idea, but I cared about her too much to push back. So I agreed, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I'd win her back. But it didn't play out that way. A few weeks later, it was officially over. She asked me to move out of the apartment, which had technically always been hers. I didn't fight her on it. The breakup had already taken enough out of me. I had no energy left to argue over a bed frame or a lamp. I needed a new place fast. I didn't have the luxury of time to hunt for something decent, so I settled on a dingy one-room studio in this crumbling old building that looked like it had been abandoned since the 70s. Honestly, it looked like a haunted house. That probably should have been a red flag. But the rent was dirt cheap, the place was available immediately, and the landlord only asked for a single month's deposit up front. Going back to live with my parents wasn't an option. I loved them, but that would have felt like failure. So I moved into the grimy studio, telling myself it was temporary. Moving in was easy. I didn't own much, and I wasn't about to bicker with my ex over stuff we bought together. As long as I had my Xbox and my TV, I figured I'd be fine. The day after I moved in, I knocked on the door across the hall to introduce myself. Music was thumping behind the door, loud, aggressive bass. When the guy finally answered, he only opened the door a sliver. He was young, bearded, spoke with a heavy Cockney accent, and looked more startled than anything. I said something friendly, told him I'd just moved in across the way. I offered the usual, "If you ever need sugar or whatever," line. He just stared back, cold, uneasy. Then he said his name was Jack. But here's the weird part. Something about the way he said it felt off. Like he'd made the name up on the spot. I don't know why I felt that. It was just a gut thing. But I shrugged it off, figured he was just socially awkward. A few weeks went by and I noticed something strange. Different people were coming and going from Jack's flat at all hours of the night. One morning, I ran into a man leaving that flat. I greeted him, and he returned the hello, his breath reeking of booze. I asked if he was Jack's friend. He paused, then muttered, Yeah, I'm Jack." He wasn't. It confirmed what I had suspected. Jack wasn't Jack, and neither was this guy. Whoever lived in that flat, it wasn't a single person. It was a rotating cast. When the landlord came around to collect the next month's rent, I casually asked about the tenant across the hall. He scratched his head for a bit and then said, "Oh, Steven. Best tenant I've got. Always pays on time, no noise complaints." He said Steven paid by direct deposit on the first of every month without fail. I thought about telling him what I'd seen, the strangers, the odd behavior, but stopped myself. It wasn't really my business, was it? Yeah, it was sketchy, but unless someone was getting hurt, I figured I'd stay out of it. I'd never been the type to get involved in other people's affairs. That was a mistake. About a week later, I was fast asleep when something jolted me awake. Heavy footsteps echoing in the stairwell outside my flat. I had this instant, stomach-churning feeling it had something to do with the unit across the hall. I sat up in bed, groggy and confused. Then came the pounding. "Police! Open the door or we'll break it down!" My heart nearly exploded. I froze. I couldn't move. Then another bang snapped me into action. I scrambled out of bed, unlatched the door, and opened it. A blinding flashlight hit me in the face as two armed officers stormed inside, shouting. One of them threw me to the floor. "Hands behind your back. Move and you're getting shot." Before I could even respond, he yanked my arms behind me and cuffed me. I couldn't breathe. I was trembling, barely registering what was happening. They stood me up on my knees, facing the door, and one officer held it open as a second team pounded on the door across the hall. No answer. They didn't wait long. A third cop arrived with a battering ram, called it the Big Key, and they smashed the door open with a sickening crunch of splintering wood. I expected them to drag out someone kicking and screaming, but instead their tone changed. It became gentle. "Are you okay? Do you know where you are? Can you hear me?" Moments later, an officer stepped out holding a girl. She looked maybe 16 at most. She was barely dressed, her skin bruised, hair matted with grease. She looked broken. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. I looked at one of the officers, my face frozen in horror. He glared at me and muttered, "Let me guess. You didn't know anything about it. Save it for the interview." But I really didn't. At the station, they grilled me. Hard. They asked about human trafficking, forced prostitution. They tried to pin it on me, as if I were some ringleader. I broke down. I told them everything I knew. Every strange face I saw. Every late-night visitor. Every gut feeling I'd ignored. Eventually, they believed me. They let me go. But I couldn't shake the guilt. I'd walked past monsters, smiled at them, maybe even joked with them in passing, never realizing what they were doing behind that door. What that girl, and maybe others, were going through just meters from where I slept. I moved back in with my parents not long after. I couldn't live there anymore, and I couldn't bring myself to look for a new place, not knowing what kind of horrors might be happening just out of sight. So please, if something feels off in your neighborhood, don't ignore it. Don't brush it aside like I did. If something seems wrong, call the police. Because sometimes, it really is your business. And speaking up might be the only thing that stands between someone and their personal hell. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, and if you could survive only one of them, which one would it be? Don't forget to drop your guess. Which story do you think was the fake one? Also, if you enjoyed the episode, hit super thanks if you're on YouTube, or send us some stars if you're on Facebook to show some love and make your comment stand out. Want to go next level? Get early access to upcoming episodes, exclusive members-only content, and much more by joining our YouTube membership or becoming a Patreon supporter. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's waiting there for you. Don't forget to like, share, and catch up on our previous episodes. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.